I met my neighbor. She brought me cookies. Thank you, Katie from upstairs. They're really good. I did a thing. I made a cake. What up? Welcome back to Movie Munchies. I'm Alexis. This is Treat Day. Today we're not going to be watching something because we watched something yesterday. Nightmare Before Christmas. I said I was going to make a cake. This video is me making that cake. Here we go. I'm sure a lot of you know, if you're on the cake baking side of YouTube, Yolanda Gamp from How to Cake It. That was the show that she started with, that I started off watching, that inspired me to start making cakes. For this cake, I decided to use Yolanda's chocolate cake recipe, her ultimate chocolate cake recipe. But instead of just going with the regular cocoa mix, I decided to use half mocha hot chocolate and half cocoa. Get a little bit of boiling water mixed in with that. You mix it up and let it sit to the side and cool for a little bit. Then I started on the dry ingredients. Flour, baking powder, baking soda, and salt. Mix that together until it's all incorporated. Put it to the side while you beat together the sugar and the butter. And yes, I know there are regular sized sticks of butter. Not in my store, not when I went to go look. And for your cakes, you always want to make sure that everything is room temperature. I have tried to make cakes where the eggs or the milk or the butter were not all room temperature. It makes a huge difference. If there's a problem texturally with your cake, it's probably because your stuff wasn't room temperature. The eggs, the butter, room temp. It's very important. And I apparently don't know how to crack eggs, so I told you I'm an amateur at this. I can't bake a cake to save my life. But don't worry, I got it all out. So once the butter and sugar is all fluffy, then you want to add the eggs 2 at a time, very slowly. And you'll know that the temperature of your ingredients isn't right at this stage. Then you alternate the dry and wet ingredients, the flour mixture with the chocolate. And I, of course, made a huge mess, as you do. So I did a 19-inch round and a 6-inch round. I wanted them to be kind of, off from each other because I didn't want to stack. When I stacked them, I didn't want them to be like directly on top of each other. I wanted them to be like a little off center. So the bottom tier is going to be Jack's tier, the top Sally's. And it goes in the oven at 350 for who knows how long. Really. 45 to 50 minutes. And while I was waiting on that, among other things, clean up my mess. Clean as you go. Please. Clean as you go. I think the 6-inch is done. Let's do a poke test. Nope. I'm in for another 10 minutes. I checked the cakes, they're done. They can come out now. Ooh. Beautiful. We're making a peppermint hot chocolate German buttercream. I typically don't care for a lot of different kinds of buttercreams. Swiss meringue, Italian meringue. You can just really heavily taste the butter in it. I found this German buttercream recipe on Pinterest, and I have been using it for most of my cakes. It kind of solidifies just like regular buttercream when it's cold, but it's made with a custard base, so it's got more depth to it. It's not just butter and sugar, you know what I mean? So I made this the night before, let it cool. It came out a lot thicker because I infused the milk part with a hot chocolate, and I've never done that before. Usually I make a vanilla German buttercream. This is my first time adding actual flavor to it, but I infused the milk with the flavor that I wanted and then made the custard. I didn't get to record it. I'm sorry. I had some technical difficulties. I've never done this before, okay? I'm trying my best. So you add the custard to your butter and sugar mixture until it's all well incorporated. Then taste test, of course. Yes, I washed my hands multiple times. I just didn't put it in the video. It's good. I can't wait to put the peppermint in it. It's really good. Ugh. Excited. It's really good. It's really good. It's really good. Then once all that was incorporated, I added the peppermint extract to make it peppermint hot chocolate. And you know what? It tasted exactly like peppermint hot chocolate. That tastes exactly like peppermint hot chocolate. Yes! Ugh, it's so good! Then I added the black food coloring to the buttercream, and as I was doing this, I sat there thinking, and thinking, and thinking, and then a travesty. Utter travesty. You know what I just realized? I didn't dye the cakes. It takes half the fun out of it, doesn't it? It's upsetting. With no color. Except for the buttercream, which turned out nice. And it still tastes good. So I level the cakes, cut them in half, and I simple syrup them with a mixture of Hershey's chocolate syrup, dark chocolate syrup, and a simple syrup that I had made a long time ago that was just sitting in the fridge ready to be used. Simple syrup is equal parts water and sugar boiled down until the sugar has dissolved into the water. Syrup helps the cakes to stay moist, locks in the moisture. As far as I know, that's what I've been told. I wanted to get more of like a chocolate flavor, so that's why I added the chocolate syrup into the simple syrup. Before the filling, I decided to crush up some peppermint. To get crushed peppermints, I know you can buy peppermint crushed up already. I know because I saw it in the store. But the packs of peppermint sticks cost $1 a piece at Walmart. And the crushed peppermint costed more than that. So I bought the 2 boxes of peppermint sticks. Of course, that meant I had to unwrap every single peppermint stick from a single box of peppermint sticks. It took a long time. But I think it was worth it. Remember how I said I wanted to do some Oogie Boogie green in there? I had to represent my man. I used the juniper green color. Swirled it into store-bought marshmallow fluff. It took a while, but it got there. In the end, I kind of wish I had made marshmallow filling from scratch. Because this one turned out like really sweet. Like really sweet. it wasn't bad. It just took over, like, the whole cake. The cake was good. I'll talk about that more when we get to that part. The cake was good. It's just if I had made the marshmallow filling myself, for sure it would have been probably a third of the sweetness that this store-bought marshmallow fluff was. But, you know, there's only so much you can do as one person. So I filled each cake with a green marshmallow fluff, the Oogie Boogie snotty yucky green, the crushed peppermint, and mini marshmallows. Kind of like you would in a regular mug of hot chocolate. And of course, I always fill my cakes with the most oozy, confrontational fillings that just really want to fight me because they always just drip out of the cakes while they're in the fridge. And I'm not just talking about this cake. I'm talking every cake that I've ever made. It seems like the filling never wants to stay in. But that's okay. You kind of scrape it on the outside, put some more frosting on it, then you're good to go. No big deal. Nothing ever happened. Everything's fine. Truthfully, this was the first thing that I did. This whole process took several days, and I needed time for the cake toppers to dry so that they'd be ready to actually like paint and put on the cake. Yeah, I had no idea what I was doing. I've never used gum paste before, and I decided to use the gum paste for Zero. It dries really hard, but it's also extremely delicate. I felt like since he has a really like flowy, ghosty body, it would be appropriate. And I decided to use foil. I crumbled it up and shaped it the way that I needed it to go in order to drape his body over it and kind of maneuvered it and shaped it how I wanted to and set it aside to dry. I did this a couple times. I did 2 of them. And honestly, I was surprised at how easy his body was. His head was an entirely different story. Gum paste it's like Play-Doh, except you can't play with it for too long. It dries out. But otherwise, I kind of had to just envision it. I was really freehanding a lot of this. And, you know, I had ideas, but how to execute them, I wasn't sure. I just had to go as I went. Go as I went. Make it up as I go. I kind of had to make it up as I went along. Then I moved on to his ears, which were easy. In theory, I had no idea how I was going to attach his ears once they dried. I cut out a few, and then I draped them over 2 pieces of foil to get them that wavy, you know, kind of like flowing in the breeze. Do ghost dogs feel breezes? I don't know. But I made several of them, just in case. You always want to make extra because I imagine that they'd be breaking. Now at this point, I was feeling really good. Things were going well. Unbeknownst to me, the head. The f***ing head. It looks like an elephant. I thought his head would be simple, but I don't know how to do this. I think I've been working with this piece for too long.
"2,000 years later."
I can't figure out how to do this dog's head. So here was my issue. I was trying to get the length of Zero's head, the pointiness of his nose, and I was also trying to have his mouth open, kind of like he is in the picture. But I couldn't figure out how to get his mouth to stay open and to look the way that it looks. Because his, like, it goes back, like, real far. You know what I'm saying? And I couldn't figure that out. He looked like an elephant. And it was upsetting. Turns out, all I needed was a teardrop shape. But I didn't get that until the third try. It took me far too long to do Zero's head. I worked it out. Turned out okay. The bow tie, thankfully, took no time at all. It was super simple. All I had to do was make the little bat head and the wings. The wings were really fun. I did this out of fondant, black fondant, which I already had on hand. It was really easy. It didn't dry as hard as the gum paste did, but I didn't expect it to, and I kind of needed it to be sturdier than the gum paste. Ultimately, I had these things drying for like 2 days. I put a sticky note on the oven that said, "Do not turn the oven on." Would have been devastated. So once those things were dry, I very painstakingly, over several hours, attempted to take the foil out of the bottom of Zero's body. It took effort, and there was a little crack that showed up in the one I ultimately wanted to use, but it's barely noticeable. It looked really good. And I had the foresight to poke some toothpick holes inside of the bottom of his head and his body so that I could attach his head to his body. And I made a collar. I didn't film that part, but I made a little collar so that he could have somewhat of a neck. Then the ears. One thing after another. The ears were extremely delicate, and I broke half of them. It was devastating. I had no idea going into putting him together how I was going to attach the ears to his actual head. I attempted white chocolate, because when you see on like the baking competition, the baking shows, or whatever, they'll use some melted white chocolate to stick things to other things, and then they'll spray with a little cold spray. Yeah, that didn't work for me. First of all, I didn't have cold spray, so I don't know what I was thinking in the first place. Second of all, white chocolate is very temperamental, and it did not melt. It didn't. It just didn't. I sat there for a long time, much longer than I needed to, before I was like, this isn't gonna work. So ultimately, I decided to use more gum paste to stick his gum paste ears to his gum paste head. And eventually it worked out after some sacrifices, but that's why you make multiple things. So to paint the bow, I used this Confectionery Accents metallic snow white color gel. At first I wasn't impressed by it. It was super transparent and didn't show up very well. It shows up really well on the camera, but I had to go back over it twice to make the lines really show up. But once I did that, when I shook it up real well, and used the initial part that was basically just oil, it actually turned out really good. It really did. His bow tie honestly was my favorite part, making it, because it gave me the least amount of trouble. So then I used the coal black liquid gel food color by Chef Master and the super red to paint Zero's face. His eyes turned out actually really dark, so I used some tissue just to kind of blot them a little bit to make them a little less intense. It turned out pretty alright. And then, of course, I used the wrong paintbrush when I was painting his nose. Don't ask me how I did this. I set the black paintbrush to the side, and I had the red paintbrush that I planned to use for the red dye over here, and then I swear I picked it up. I swear I picked up the red paintbrush. But no, I picked up the black paintbrush, dipped it in the red food coloring, and painted his nose black. So I had to go back and wipe that off and go over it with red again. And I chose red because I needed it for other things, and also, you kind of got the little Rudolph story. I know Zero's nose is a jack-o'-lantern and it's technically orange. I decided to go with red, okay? This is a wintry Christmas thing. Rudolph, red nose, you know how it goes. And of course I got paint on the underside of his head, but mistakes, right? Mistakes is how we learn. Yeah, that's how we learn. Not everything's going to be perfect. His head looks glossy because I decided to paint over it with some of the metallic Snow White color. I was trying to cover up some of the imperfections. Can you blame me? So I had to confront my fear of fondant. I've never been good at covering cakes with fondant, and I say that as though I've done it many times. I really haven't. I've tried to cover a cake with fondant maybe 3 times, and that includes this. It is intimidating. It scares me. It sweats when the temperature is not right. It cracks when the temperature is not right. I have never figured out how to smooth it all the way around without getting a little fold on the end. And I imagine that comes with more and more practice, which, if I keep doing all of this, I'll get that practice in for sure. But it wasn't so bad. And the good thing about fondant is you can cover up your mistakes with more fondant. Or paint. Food safe paint that I bought from the cake store. I quite enjoyed painting Jack's tear. Again, it didn't take as long as it seems like it might have taken. But what I enjoyed about it was that the little pinstripes of his suit aren't all perfect and lined up, and there are actually a lot of smaller stripes in between the longer stripes, if that makes sense. So for Sally's tear, I decided to do a little patchwork thing, like how her dress is. And to do that, I had to dye some white fondant 3 different colors. I used Aster Mauve to get a kind of purpley color, purpley pinkish color, Delphinium Blue, and then a mixture of golden yellow and ivory to get the yellow. I didn't want him to be too bright. I wanted him to be kind of pastel. So then I rolled those out and I kind of cut them haphazardly. Again, I was just winging it. I didn't have a super intricate plan. So I literally patched together the fondant covering for Sally's tear. I did the pink, purple, and then I did the blue, and then I did the yellow, and I kind of just cut and remove things as I went. And wherever one fondant met the end of another, I cut along that seam and took the 2 pieces out so that they could line up, And there were mistakes made, but it turned out pretty good in the long run. And I was actually very proud of it. So Sally's dress has all these little, designs on each of the patches. Some are swirls, some are just polka dots, some are, little stitch lines or whatever. So I recreated that on each patch of color of fondant on her tier of the cake. And for that, I used a food safe marker that I had from making a different cake before. It got everywhere. The ink from the marker, the black food coloring from the frosting, and then of course the food coloring from dyeing the different fondants. My hands were several different colors for a little while. But I actually had a lot of fun covering Sally's tear. And then, putting all the flips and flares on it. Then it was time to stack the cakes. And this was intimidating because, again, I've never done this before. So I got some bubble tea straws, which I have never been able to find at the store. I bought them on Amazon. I just eyeballed about where I wanted Sally's tier are to sit on top of Jack's tier. Stuck a bunch of bubble tea straws in, cut them right around the height that they needed to be, and then held my breath. So now that I have all these glorious pieces, and the cakes are successfully stacked, put 0 on top, and then I put Jack's bow tie in the space on the bottom tier. And I didn't really attach the little bow part of the bow tie. I just took a toothpick, cut it in half, and stuck it inside the cake, and then put the 2 wings of the bow on either side, and let the weight of the little bat head sit on top and hold them there. Listen, I don't think anyone is surprised. If you're a fan of black licorice, I'm sorry. That's all I really have to say. Because for the rest of us, it causes nothing but trouble. It was my idea, yes, to make a glorious forest out of black licorice. Did I have the foresight to kind of think, maybe the structural integrity of Twizzlers is not what it needs to be in order for them to stand up and look like trees? I went with it anyway, and it didn't work. I tried cutting them up to get some branches. I tried putting toothpicks in the middle. That didn't work. In the end, I just had to use the candy canes as a support system. Again, there was no plan. I was just sticking things in the cake, so I had to make it work because there were holes. I kept the candy canes in the wrappers because then they're easier to pull out and other people to eat them still without them being super sticky and contaminated by my hands, which I washed several times. The black licorice was a different story. I only put a few of those on and then took them all off and just threw them away, because who needs those? But don't worry, what I didn't use from the rest of the bag I gave to someone who actually enjoys black licorice. You're welcome, Nancy. It took some work, some rearranging, some adding and adding more and adding more. That's kind of been my policy when it comes to artistic flair. If you don't like it, just keep going. Eventually you'll get to somewhere that looks decent. So the forest, so to speak, turned out more candy cane than black licorice, and it didn't actually look the way that I had wanted it to initially. But I was okay with it. Overall, I was very proud of the way the cake turned out. For being super ambitious and having so many parts to it that I had no idea what I was doing when I was putting it together, it turned out really good and I'm very proud of it. This was the first time I'd ever got to immediately cut into a cake as soon as I had made it. Usually I stick them in the fridge and wait until I have to bring it to whatever thing I'm bringing it to, because usually it's like a gift for somebody. But for this one, I got to cut into it immediately and try it myself. And I'll tell you what, for as much effort as I put into it, it was actually really good. I'm about to try it. Like hours, days.
Yeah.
Days of work.
Happy.
Yeah. It's good. It's really good. The chocolate flavor did get lost a little bit underneath the overpowering sweetness of the marshmallow. But if you're like me and you enjoy sweet things, and it wasn't a bad thing, really. And I like the little crunchy bits from the peppermint sticks and the kind of chewiness of the mini marshmallows. Like having all those textural differences in the cake gave it a good mouthfeel. I'm proud of it. Would I do some things differently? Yes. But for what it turned out to be, it was really good. And yes, I took it to work to share with people. I wasn't going to eat that thing all by myself. The general consensus was that they enjoyed it. I had to take it apart in order to transport it to work. So that was sad, and I had to eventually throw the bow tie and zero away that I worked so hard on, and that was kind of devastating, but there you have it. So that was my Nightmare Before Christmas treat day cake. Not every treat day will involve cake, but that's what the movie commentary videos are for. So if you haven't checked that one out, then I guess you can go back and watch my commentary for The Nightmare Before Christmas. And I will see you next time for another movie and more food. Peace. Or should I say, Merry Christmas to all and to all a good New Year.